We are living in the days of Noah. Matthew 24:37 through to 39. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. But what was happening during those seemingly normal days? The people of Noah's time had turned away from God, and their hearts had become hardened. They were living lives that were reprobate, far from the ways of God, and yet they carried on with their daily routines, seemingly oblivious to the coming destruction. In the same way, we are living in a time when many have turned away from God, and our society is becoming increasingly reprobate. Yet, like in the days of Noah, life goes on as usual. We may be tempted to think that everything is fine, that there is no need to worry or make any changes. But we must remember that just as the flood came in Noah's time, so too will the day of judgment come upon us. And I marvel at how people can live their lives without the slightest concern of judgment. And people forget how sudden and instantaneous the judgment of God can be on an individual. We often hear about the mercy and grace of God, but we tend to forget that God is also a just God, and He will judge each and every one of us according to our deeds. The fact that we live in a world where evil is rampant should be a wake-up call for us to examine our lives and prepare for the judgment to come. We can see from history and from the Bible that God's judgment can come suddenly and without warning. In the book of Genesis, we read about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where God rained down fire and brimstone on the cities, wiping out all the inhabitants. In the book of Exodus, we read about the plagues that God brought upon Egypt, culminating in the death of the firstborn of all the Egyptians. These are just a few examples of how God can bring judgment suddenly and without warning. In the New Testament, we read about the parable of the rich fool in Luke 12:16 through to 21, where a man stores up his wealth and plans to live a life of ease, only to have God say to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you prepared for yourself?" This parable teaches us that we must not live our lives without the slightest concern of judgment, because we never know when our time will come. Even death. Death can come unannounced and uninvited, and a person be facing judgment. I am amazed at how people can live their lives without the slightest concern of judgment. They think they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, without any consequences. But the truth is, we will all stand before God one day, and we will be judged according to our deeds. We must not be like the rich fool, who stored up treasures for himself, but was not rich toward God. Jesus tells us that when the Son of Man returns, people will be living their normal lives, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, without any concern for the things of God. This is a sobering reminder that we must always be ready for the Lord's return. It is easy for us to get caught up in the cares of this world, especially with the distractions that surround us. We can become so focused on our jobs, our families, our hobbies, and our interests that we forget that our ultimate goal is to live for God and to prepare for His return. This is why Jesus warns us to be alert and to watch, because we never know when He will come. The fact that people will be living their normal lives when the Lord returns should not be a surprise to us. After all, life goes on, and people will continue to eat, drink, and get married. But what is surprising is that people will be so focused on these normal things that they will not even think about God. They will be like the people in Noah's time, who were eating and drinking and getting married, until the flood came and swept them all away. As Christians, we must be different. Once again, as Christians, we must be different. One more time. As Christians, we must be different. We must not be so consumed by the cares of this world that we forget about the things of God. The devil knows that if he can keep us busy and preoccupied, we will have little time to think about God or to do His will. He knows that if we are distracted by the things of this world, we will not be able to hear God's voice or to follow His leading. This is why he works so hard to keep us busy and preoccupied, to keep us from doing the things that really matter. We can see the devil's work all around us. We live in a culture that is obsessed with material possessions, social media, and entertainment. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we need to have more, do more, and be more. We are told that we need to keep up with the latest trends and fashions, that we need to have the newest gadgets and toys, and that we need to be constantly connected to our devices. But the truth is, all of these things are just distractions. They keep us from focusing on what is really important, which is our relationship with God and our mission to spread His love to others. The devil wants us to be so busy with the cares of this world that we have no time for God. As Christians, we must resist the devil's tactics. We must prioritize our relationship with God and make time for Him in our busy lives. We must be intentional about seeking His will and following His leading. We must also be mindful of the distractions that surround us and be careful not to let them consume us. In the time of Noah, sin was great. Sin was exalted. In our generation, sin is exalted. Sin is worshipped. In the days of Noah, the only thing that mankind could think of was sin. God Himself saw how great sin had become. Men, women, adults, and children were sinning. Genesis 6:5-6, King James Version. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that He had made man on the earth, and it grieved Him at His heart. In our time, sin has become the norm. It has taken over to the extent that not engaging in sinful behavior makes one stand out as strange. People sin to gain approval from others or to achieve personal goals, often for unjustifiable reasons. This pattern is reminiscent of the time of Noah, when sin became rampant and eventually led to the world's destruction. If you were to listen to the news today, you would be shocked at the level of sinfulness that prevails. Some Christians live in a sheltered environment and are not aware of the extent of sin in the world. The truth is, some Christians live a sheltered life, so much so that they are naive to the sin of the world. This world is more sinful than you could ever imagine. Sin is worshipped. Unimaginable things are happening, and the Bible told that these perilous times will come. 2 Timothy 3:1-5 foretells the traits of people during these times. Lovers of themselves, covetous, proud, blasphemous, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, lacking natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, fierce, and traitors, among others. People are rejecting godliness and shunning holiness. Despite the abounding sin, life goes on without any consideration of God, just as in the days of Noah. Noah's obedience to God's command to build an ark is an example of God's long-suffering and patience towards humanity. Despite the fact that it took Noah 120 years to complete the ark, God gave the people of that time ample opportunity to repent and turn to Him. Noah preached for 120 years, warning the people of the destruction that was to come. But they chose to ignore his message and make fun of him instead. In our time, the gospel of salvation is still being preached, and there are still people rejecting it. For over 2,000 years, the message has been the same: repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. People have come and gone, preaching and shouting this message on the streets, on TV, on radio stations, and on social media. But many are still preoccupied with the cares of this world, just like the people in the days of Noah. God's long-suffering nature means that even those who have made fun of Him can still receive forgiveness if they repent. He forgives all sins, no matter how unforgivable they may seem to society. Every day is an opportunity to repent and turn to God. But many are still focused on this temporary life, without a care for eternity. We have been given signs of the end times, and they are happening already. Yet many still choose to ignore the warnings. Just like in the days of Noah, people are living their normal lives, without a thought for God's judgment that is coming. But the message remains the same. Repent and turn to God. Don't wait until it's too late. Take heed of the warnings and choose salvation today.